we need to obtain the value of this given expression. So let's begin. So what we'll do, let's consider the first term, and we are going to multiply the numerator and the denominator within the parentheses with iota. So we have I times I plus square root of 3 divided by I times negative I plus square root of 3 whole raised to the power 200. Added to. So similarly, for the second term, what we'll do, we'll multiply I to both the numerator and the denominator. So we have I times I minus square root of 3 divided by I times I plus square root of 3 whole raised to the power of 200. So this is going to give us, so we have I squared plus I times square root of 3 divided by negative I squared plus I times square root of 3 whole raised to the power of 200. Plus we have I times I, so that's I squared. We have I squared minus I times square root of 3 divided by I squared times I squared plus I times square root of 3 whole raised to the power of 200. Now I squared, that's the value of iota. So iota squared is negative 1. Let's use this value. This will give us negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 divided by the negative of negative 1 will be positive 1. So we have 1 plus I times square root of 3 whole raised to the power of 200. Plus, so here we have I squared, so that's negative 1. So we have negative 1 minus I times square root of 3 divided by negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 whole raised to the power of 200. Next, what we'll do, we'll divide the numerator and the denominator within the parentheses with 2. So that means we have negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 divided by 2 whole divided by 1 plus I times square root of 3 divided by 2 whole raised to the power of 200. So we'll use the same thing or the second term. We'll divide both the numerator and the denominator within the parentheses by positive 2. So we have negative 1 minus I times square root of 3 divided by 2 whole divided by negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 whole divided by 2 whole raised to the power of 200. The reason why we are doing this, because if we consider the cube roots of unity, so the cube roots of unity are, we have 1, omega and omega squared, and we know that the value of omega is negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 divided by 2. And if we have omega squared, so that will be negative 1 minus I times square root of 3 divided by 2. Now, we can use this to fact. So let's rewrite our two expression, the two terms as. So in the numerator, we have negative 1 plus I times square root of 3 over 2. So that becomes omega. This will be divided with 1 plus I times square. So here it's a positive term in the denominator, but we have negative 1 minus I square root of 3 over 2. So that's omega squared. So this will be simply negative omega squared whole raised to the power of 200. Plus, so here we have negative 1 minus I times square root of 3 over 2. So that's omega squared divided by negative 1 plus I times square root of, so that's omega. So here we have omega squared over omega raised to the power of 200. Now let's further simplify it. So this will give us negative 1 over omega raised to the power of 200 plus omega raised to the power of 200. Now, what we can do, we have negative 1 raised to the power of 200 multiplied to 1 over omega raised to the power of 200 plus omega raised to the power of 200. So this becomes positive. The reason why we have separated it, because we know that omega cube, which is the product of the cube roots of unity, that gives us the value 1. So here this 1 can be replaced with omega cubed, such that we get omega squared raised to the power of 200 plus omega raised to the power of 200. So that means we have omega raised to the power of 400 plus omega raised to the power of 200. Now, we can rewrite omega raised to the power of 400 as omega raised to the power of 399 times omega plus omega raised to the power of 198 times omega squared. So this is omega cubed raised to the power of 133 times omega. Omega cube whole raised to the power of 66 times omega squared. Now we can replace omega cube with 1. That leaves us with omega plus omega squared. And we know that 1 plus omega squared, the sum of the roots of unity is equals to 0. So that means this value will be -1. Now that this value is equals to -1.